a couple of weeks ago, we started going back through our series on Daniel and the Revelation. The last couple of weeks, we were looking at the key in the book of Daniel. And what we saw is that the key to understanding the book of Revelation is understanding the theme of the book of Daniel. If you don't understand what Daniel is focusing on, you don't have a clue as to how to approach Revelation. Both of them are tied together, but even although most people put Daniel and Revelation together, the truth is that there is a lot of misunderstanding concerning the book of Daniel and what it is really focused on. For many people, it's just like, these prophecies are like you would look into a crystal ball. You would go to inquire of an oracle. It's somebody who is telling you the future. But even though this is partly true, the thing is, what is the point of looking into the future? What is the point of giving you information about the future? What is behind this information? Because if there's not some great purpose behind this, then it's just like, yeah, it's interesting. It's to tantalize your imagination. But what does it really accomplish? And why is it so important? This is why understanding the background in the book of Daniel is so critical. So this afternoon we are going to continue our study, and we still are going to be going through the book of some things in the book of Daniel, because we may not get to Revelation until next week. But this evening I want to make the connection between Daniel and Revelation. I want to show you that the connection is there absolutely clearly, that God himself outlined this connection so clearly that if you are a reasonable person, you cannot miss it. So I'm going to share my screen, and again I'm going to use my slides, my PowerPoint slides, as the basis of our presentation this afternoon. So I have the title on the screen, Daniel's Time to Speak. I may actually entitle it The Time of the End. The Time of the End. But let's see what happens. So I want to begin with the verse in Daniel 12 and verse 4, where the angel speaking to Daniel said, "But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased." Now last week we looked at this verse, and I actually like the translation from the Amplified Bible, which I'm going to bring up on the screen. And it said, "But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Then," I don't think I should downplay the significance of that little word, "then." Even though it's not in the original, it's put in by the translator, but I think it's important. "Then many shall run to and fro and search anxiously through the book, and the knowledge of God's purposes as revealed by his prophets shall be increased and become great." We looked at this in some detail last week, and I don't think we can emphasize this too much, because this is a divine statement. This is God speaking. And what it says is that at the time of the end, the book of Daniel was to be shut up and sealed. Shut up, sealed, until some point referred to as the time of the end. Then at that time, many would run to and fro and search anxiously through the book. That's important. It doesn't mean people running up and down and going to university and searching through Google and so forth. It's people searching through the book. And as a result, a knowledge of God's purposes as they were revealed to his prophets, especially the prophet Daniel, shall be increased and shall become great. So what God himself promises is that at the end of time, at the time of the end, information about the book of Daniel will become great. because people would be studying the book of Daniel. And until that time, the secret, the secrets of the book of Daniel would not be understood. This was God's design. God shut it up. And I think we looked at this last week, and I think I entitled it a closed package. It's like somebody gives you a package and he says, don't open this until the 13th of October. Don't open this until the 13th of October. You take the package and you go away with it, and you keep it locked up in your safe. On the 13th of October, you find yourself in a great crisis, a great trouble. You find yourself in a situation where the police are coming for you, or the debt collectors are coming for you, or something traumatic. And on the day you open your safe and you take out your package, and when you open it, the exact answer to your problem is inside the box. Exactly at that time. And this is what the book of Daniel is like. It was a package that God shut up and sealed, and he said it was not to be understood until the time of the end. Why? Because at the time of the end, there is a crisis coming, and God's people need a package at that time. There's something that is locked up in these books, which is exactly what God's people need for this time of the end. So God has made provision before the time comes that we shall be prepared. He gave us a message. This is how I understand the book of Daniel, and this is why, and of course also Revelation. And this is why, I feel it is so important to study these books again and again, because we get some kind of understanding, but each time we go over it, that understanding deepens and we see more clearly. So, when is this fulfilled? I guess it's the same thing as saying, when is this time of the end? And we can't put our finger on a date like the 20th of March 2025. We can't put our finger on a date, but there are some clues in the book which give us an idea of what we are to look for. So, let me read a few verses here that are somewhat connected to that question. The first passage is Daniel 12:7-9. It says, Daniel writes, and I heard a man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river. And by the way, I think this person is Jesus, or at that time, Michael. I heard a man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever, that it shall be for a time, times and a half. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. And I heard, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Now, I want to highlight a few statements here, and I'm highlighting them because we are going to come to them and spend a little bit of time looking at them in some kind of detail. So, the man was upon the waters of the river. I want to highlight that point. He's standing on the waters of the river. He holds up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven. He swears by him that liveth forever. He says that it shall be for a certain time period, a time, times and a half. 1, 2, 3, 4 points so far. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people. Now what does this mean? I think this means that there's coming a time when the holy people, or the people of God, will have no more power. The power of God's people is to be eroded. God's people are to reach a place where they have no more power. It's the same thing as what we call the close of probation. It's when there's no more any power in God's people to preach the gospel or to reach people with the gospel. And he And I think this refers to somebody that is referred to as the king of the north. When he's able to scatter the power of the holy people, that is the time, the Lord says, when all these things shall be finished. Of course, Daniel doesn't understand. What does he know about these things? And so he's asking. But the Lord tells him, go your way. For nobody is going to understand these words. Nobody is going to know the meaning of these words until the time of the end. And you can understand why, if you read these words and you believe them, then these prophecies should be top of the list in the things that we study. You know, once you understand salvation, righteousness by faith, the truth about the kingdom, then now these prophecies are going to take us to another level. And so it becomes top priority for us to study and to keep on studying these things. So let me just list the things that Daniel mentioned. In Daniel 12 here, he says, he saw a man standing on the river. And it says an angel, I believe this was Michael. And we know who Michael was. He stands on the river. He holds up his hands to heaven, right hand and left hand. And he swears by the one who lives forever and ever, that the time period, I'm not going to dwell on the time period this evening, but I wanted to see that there's a time period. It will be for a time, times and a half, 3.5 times. He also said that the book was shut and sealed, and it was not to be opened until the time of the end. So this 3.5 times obviously has to do with the time of the end. It has to do with the time of the end. Whatever that 3.5 times was, the book was shut and sealed until the time of the end. So there's a correlation between the 3.5 times and the time of the end. And the fourth thing is that Daniel was told that he was to rest. Daniel was told to take his rest because he would come to he would rest in his lot until the end of the days. So, all right, I want you to notice those 6 points because it's important that we take note of them because we're going to connect them to something else. Let's continue. Right, so the angel says, go thou thy way till the end be, but thou shalt rest, and notice what he says, and stand in thy lot at the end of the days. What does that mean? Daniel is going to rest. That means Daniel is going to die, as we understand that he's going to sleep. But the angel says, at the end of the days. When is the end of the days? I believe we could say that the end of the days is the time that we call the time of the end. At the end of the days, Daniel is going to stand in his lot. Does it mean that Daniel is going to be resurrected? I don't think so. I think what it means is that Daniel's prophecy is going to take its place at the end of the days. And until that time, Daniel was to rest, and in the time of the end, everything was going to come together, right? As we saw, I put it on the list here. Daniel was told to rest. The last point, point number 6. All right. The end of the days. What happens at the end of the days? What do we see in the Bible? Or what do we see in these books of Daniel and Revelation that can give us a clue as to when and how and where this end of days will take place? All right. Now, the first passage I want to go to is a passage from Daniel chapter 8. Now, I'm going to bring up the Bible for this passage because I want us to see clearly what this is talking about. All right, so let's go to Daniel, the book of Daniel. Daniel chapter 8. We just looked at this verse from Daniel 8 and verse 17. Let me find it on the Bible. Daniel 8 and verse 17. Daniel 8:17, it says, in verse 16, I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, the river Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. So this is Daniel chapter 8. We have been looking at chapter 12, but I've gone back to Daniel chapter 8 because here is the same phrase that comes up, the time of the end. The angel tells Daniel that there was a certain vision, there's a certain vision that is to be fulfilled at that time of the end. So hold on, let's make a connection. If the book of Daniel is shut up and sealed till the time of the end, then it's reasonable to believe that this prophecy is a part of what is shut up and sealed. I hope everybody's understanding my reasoning here. There's a prophecy in Daniel 8, and the angel says to Daniel that it applies to the time of the end. Then in chapter 12, Michael tells Daniel that everything is to be shut up till the time of the end, and clearly this includes the prophecy in chapter 8. What is this prophecy in Daniel chapter 8 about? Some of you already know, but let me remind those of us who may not be so familiar with it. In chapter 8, what we looked at is the little horn that waxed great to the host of heaven. It cast down some of the hosts to the ground, and it stamped upon them. He magnified himself even to the prince of the host. By him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Now here's the point. Verses 13 and 14. Then I heard one saint, holy one, speaking. And another saint, another holy one, said unto that certain holy one which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Everybody here is familiar with that prophecy, but I know that maybe many of us may not be very clear on exactly what it means. Now I'm going to highlight the translation on the right panel, because I believe the translation in the right panel is the more accurate translation. It's from the New American Standard Bible. It says, He said to me, For 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the holy place will be properly restored. Now I'm highlighting this phrase, properly restored. When is the holy place to be properly restored? And what are we talking about? We're talking about the fact that the little horn took away the daily, and the place of the sanctuary was cast down, and the little horn cast down the truth to the ground and practiced and prospered. All of this happened through the little horn, and I think most of you will agree with me that we believe this is speaking of the depredations of the Roman Catholic Church, what they did to the gospel and the darkness that came in through the dark ages. That's what I believe it means. That the sanctuary was cast down because the truth about Jesus' ministry in his church, the truth about the church being the sanctuary, the truth about Christ being our high priest, all of this was taken away by the abominable teachings of the dark ages. Now the angel came to Daniel and said that it would be 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed, or as it says in the right panel, the sanctuary is to be properly restored. Why? Because at the time of the end, something is to come out relating to the sanctuary, relating to God's people, relating to the temple, relating to the kingdom. And to understand it, it is necessary that we have a proper understanding about the kingdom of God, the ministry of Christ, the temple of the Lord, and the work that Christ is doing. So this darkness came in, and it was to remain until the time of the end. Now, there are many people who say that this prophecy was speaking about a Greek king by the name of Antiochus Epiphanes, who lived a couple of hundred years after the time of Daniel. But I say that that is nonsense. I will show you reasons why this is nonsense. Look at what it says about this little horn. He shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace he shall destroy many. Look what it says. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes. Who is this prince of princes? There's only one person who goes by this title. He shall stand up against the prince of princes. Who stood up against the prince of princes? Was it the Greek king Antiochus Epiphanes? No, it was Rome. It was Rome that crucified Christ. But he shall be broken without hand. Here, the Bible anticipates the final end of the kingdom of Rome. It shall be broken without hand. But look at the part I want you to notice. Verse 26. And the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true. Therefore shut up the vision, for it shall be for many days. When the angel said 2,300 days, he says to Daniel, it applies to some distant time in the future. Many days. But when exactly? When exactly? Go back to verse 17. We go back to verse 17 and we see where he says, this is the time when it applies. He came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said, understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. So it's absolute nonsense to say that this applied to Antiochus Epiphanes. No, 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 it applies to the time of the end. The angel tells you clearly, God tells you clearly, that this vision of Daniel 8 about the sanctuary being cleansed, the sanctuary being restored, applies to the time of the end. So it's very clear that when we begin to see increased understanding pertaining to the work of Christ, pertaining to the proper place of Christ as our temple, as our high priest, his work in the temple of our body, in the temple of the church, and even in the heavenly temple. This means that we have come to the time of the end when the sanctuary is to be restored. And why is the restoration of the sanctuary so important? It's a part of God's great process of restoration that takes place right at the end of time. The sanctuary, as we saw, is to be restored. The people are to be restored. The king is to be restored. The kingdom is to be restored. All of these things are to take place down at the time of the end. All right, so chapter 8. At the time of the end shall be the vision. And we also read verse 19. He said, behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be. Then again, when you go to Daniel 11 and verse 35, I'm not going to go to Daniel chapter 11 this evening, but I'm just going to read a couple of verses from Daniel 11, because these verses also speak of the time of the end, and I'm anxious that we understand this time of the end comes up several places in the book of Daniel. And they all apply, I believe, to the same general period of time. It says, some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them and to purge and to make them white. God's people would be terribly persecuted, even to the time of the end. So until we came down to the time of the end, there would be great persecution taking place. And I believe that this applies to what happened during the Dark Ages. But as the angel is saying to Daniel, because it is yet for a time appointed. God has appointed a time. The end of time, or the time of the end, is appointed by God. And certain things cannot happen before that time of the end. That's the point I'm really trying to emphasize. I'll read one more prophecy relating to the time of the end. This one is Daniel 11 and verse 40 that we are all familiar with. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him. And the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. I'm not going to go into that in detail this evening. Later on, when we come closer down to the end of our studies on Daniel and Revelation, we'll go back to this prophecy. But for the time being, all I want to show you is that the book of Daniel speaks about the time of the end in several places. And what we can see is that there are several events that take place at the time of the end. And round about this general period of time, I don't believe it's like a date on a calendar, like June 4, 2025. I think it's a general period of time that is referred to as the time of the end. It's a period of time when God begins to restore the truths that were cast down, when God begins to open up the book of Daniel and Revelation, when God begins to open things to our understanding that are necessary to what God wants to do in the world in these final moments of time. That is that period of time that God refers to as the time of the end. So one of the things that we can look for is the king of the south provoking the king of the north, and the king of the north coming against him like a whirlwind. That happens also at the time of the end. When that happens, you get another nail in a sure place that makes you know we are at the time of the end. Now, of course, this is why many people are interested in understanding this prophecy about the king of the north and the south. And I'm interested as well. I have to admit that I don't have an absolutely clear idea in my mind as to what this prophecy means. Who is the king of the north and who is the king of the south? There are many ideas, and it's not very clear in my own mind. But you know, if you go on the
Question.
internet and coming away, if you go on the internet and search, you'll find many people giving you different ideas about the kings of the north and the south. But I haven't found a consistent approach yet that convinces me. So I'm sure the Lord will open that up as well, because we are now in that time period. Yes, Wayne, go ahead.
Is there a correlation? Is there any connection to the last days and time of the end? Is there any relationship to those two things?
Well, I would say absolutely. I would say that, I mean, of course, the time of the end is the last days. The time of the end is the time just before Jesus comes. It's the time of the end of the world. So, of course, it's the last days. Maybe it's
The
just
reason
two
I ask,
different ways. Yeah, maybe it's just two
sorry,
different ways of expressing the same thing. But the thing is, I think the time of the end, you know, somebody can
before we
always say
move
we are
on,
living in the last. Yes, somebody can always say we are living in the last days. But the time of the end has a specific meaning that God had in His mind. Yes, go ahead.
yeah, the reason I asked the question, I think it's in Hebrews chapter 1. It talks about Christ. It say in these last days, he speaks to us through his Son. And if the time of the end and last days are the same, when did God start to speak to us through his Son? One would probably say if he started to speak to us through his Son when he came, would that be the time of the end, the beginning of the time of the end?
Okay, I understand the question. The apostles, the disciples believed that they lived in the last days, and in a sense they did, because the last days was the days when the Messiah would come. That was according to their belief, their teaching. So, of course, Jesus came. It was the last days. So, last is relative. Last can be relative. So, it was the last days then, and in another sense, we are now living in the last days in a way that they never did. So, that's why I say that, you know, the time of the end is a specific time period, while the last days is, it can apply, but it can apply otherwise too, as you pointed out. So I would be careful in equating them to being the same in every sense, you know. All right. So
David,
yes, brother Matt.
you have a minute for a question, or you want to finish?
No,
You
no,
have a
no.
minute for a question, or do you want to finish?
You can go ahead.
Okay. So the phrase "time, times, and half a time." I know it's mentioned on several occasions, and it's also mentioned as 42 months, 3.5 years, and I know there are other applications. So what is the significance? How could we determine in Revelation what is it, a literal time, or it is a prophetic time, and so on?
Yeah, that is one of the hard questions that I don't have a clear answer to. I believe that there are places you can look and you can see that it applies as prophetic time, a day for a year. But there are places where it appears again when it seems very clear that it is literal time. Now, how do you make a distinction? How do you decide what is what? Adventism has taken a position that everywhere that comes up, they say it is prophetic time, day for a year. I'm not convinced that that is correct, but I don't have a clear system of deciding when is it prophetic time and when is it literal time? I still have not seen a clear way, and it's one of those things that I am praying for an answer to. When we come to the book of Revelation, we will explore it a little bit more, but at the moment, that's the best I can say on that, Brother Matt.
Is one of the places where you have that problem, David, the two witnesses and the 3.5 days that the bodies lie dead in the street?
Sure, and it's also a little earlier on when it says they will prophesy 1260 days clothed in sackcloth, you know.
Will you at
So,
least though tie this 3.5 day understanding to something we can see as related to the time of the end?
well, I mean, we looked at the verse at the beginning. We looked at the screen. If you look at the screen, you notice the angel was told. The angel told Daniel, Michael told Daniel, that it would be for 3.5 times. And the book was to be shut and sealed till the time of the end. So I was making the point that it's 3.5 times and the time of the end seem to be related. You know,
Okay.
so that's the most I will say about it at the moment.
All right.
All right, Brother Joe. So anyway, um, right. So Daniel was told the last thing he was told in the book of Daniel, and we looked at this verse already. I just repeat it. It said, "Go thy way till the end be," Daniel 12:13. "For thou shalt rest and stand in thy lot at the end of the days." So we want to look now at this end of the days. I want to make that connection to show you that God shows us clearly what happens at the end of the days, and we go. It's this time when Daniel stands in his lot. That's how I would describe it. Now we go to the book of Revelation, and we start in chapter 10. Now we are going to start Revelation properly. We're going to go to the early chapters, but right at this point this evening, I want to make the connection between Daniel and Revelation very clear. I know we have been through this before. I'm approaching it a little differently. I want us to see that there is a straight connection between Daniel and Revelation. God makes the connection. There is a clear indication that the closed book of Daniel is opened in Revelation. That's what I'm highlighting this evening. So John says, "I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud. A rainbow was upon his head. His face was as it were the sun, his feet as pillars of fire. And he had in his hand a little book open. And he set his right foot upon the sea and his left foot on the earth." So this is what we see, or this is what John saw. An angel stood on the sea and on the earth. He held up his hand to heaven. I suppose this one only holds up one hand. The one in Daniel held up two hands. This one has a book in one hand. Maybe he held up both hands. Anyway, it says that he holds up his hand to heaven and he swears by the one who lives forever that there will be time no longer. We're going to compare these two passages, and I think any reasonable person won't be left in any doubt in his mind. There will be time no longer. He has a little book open in his hand. In verse 8 of the same Revelation 10, it says, "And the voice which I heard from heaven spake unto me again and said, Go and take the little book which is open in the hand of the angel which standeth upon the sea and upon the earth. And I took the little book out of the angel's hand and ate it up. And it was in my mouth sweet as honey, and as soon as I had eaten it, my belly was bitter. And he said unto me, Thou must prophesy again before many peoples and nations and tongues and kings." All right, I wanted to read that because I want all the details at hand before we look at the chart. So back to the chart. So, point number 6. John was told that he was to prophesy again. Okay, now we're going to try to compare both chapters. Or we're going to compare both chapters, and I want you to look at the striking, the impossible to miss correlation between Daniel 12 and Revelation 10. In Daniel 12, the angel stands on the river. In Revelation 10, the angel stands on the sea and on the earth. Now, I believe that this is significant. I believe that the sea, the river, water represents the old world. It represents the part of the earth where the beast had his domain, the old earth. The angel in Revelation 10 stands on the sea and on the earth because his message is broader in scope. It covers the entire planet. But we'll deal with that in detail when we actually come to Revelation 10 in the course of our studies on Revelation. The angel in Daniel 12 held up his hands to heaven. The angel in Revelation 10 holds up his hand to heaven. Angel in Daniel 12 swears by him that liveth forever. The one in Revelation 10 does exactly the same thing. The same exact phrase is used. The one in Daniel 12 says it shall be for 3.5 times. The one in Revelation 10 says there shall be time no longer. Now, even if you're blind and just listening to what I'm saying, you should be able to understand that there's something going on here, something that is more than normal. If you're one of those liberal theologians, you will say, John was borrowing from the book of Daniel. If you're one of those sick modern day scholars, you give John the credit and you say John borrowed from Daniel. Nonsense. This has nothing to do with John or Daniel. This is the work of God. These are God's words. God is telling them what to write in this case. So the similarity is not based on John borrowing language from Daniel. It's God making connections that we cannot miss, or we should not miss. In Daniel 12, the book was shut and sealed. Daniel was told to shut and seal the book. In Revelation 10, there is a little book open. Can there be any question in anybody's mind as to which book this is? So you can tell, what time is this then in Revelation 10? It is obviously the time of the end. Revelation 10 signifies that we have come to the time of the end. And God has now stepped in to open the little book of Daniel. And whereas Daniel was told to rest because it didn't apply to his time, what is John told? John is told that he must prophesy again. So he's telling John, and of course both of these represent the people of God. John is being told, God's people are being told, okay, your rest is over. Daniel is now standing in his lot at the end of his days. It's time to get up and get to work because the book of Daniel is now opened and you have a message. You have a message now to be given to the world. You must prophesy again before many peoples and nations and tongues and kings. So all of this, look at these two screens, these two descriptions from two different books in the Bible. Yet they are exactly, one is exactly the counterpart of the other. One is hidden, one is closed up, and the other one is the opening of that. So the book of Daniel then we can understand is described as being opened in the book of Revelation. And when we go into our studies on Revelation, we are going to see what time is this? What point in time does this happen? But for the moment, I just want us to see that God already showed us something would happen that would indicate that the book of Daniel was open and that it was time for Daniel to stand in his place. What is this hidden subject that was locked up in the book of Daniel? What is this hidden subject? Well, we have looked at this. I'm just going to read through a series of verses, not going to go too much in detail this evening. I just wanted most of all to help us to see that comparison between the two chapters. But based on some verses, we can tell what is the subject that is the target in the book of Daniel, that is to be opened up in the book of Revelation. We look at this one already. It had to do with the sanctuary being trodden underfoot and the time when the sanctuary was to be restored. He was told that it was to be at the time of the end. We looked at this already. And he was told that the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told, is true. So he was to shut up the vision. There the same language is being used. Shut up the vision. Same thing that Daniel was told later on again. So the shutting up of the vision had to do with the shutting up of the understanding about the sanctuary and the restoring of the sanctuary. That was a part of what was shut up. That's what I'm saying. Um, we looked at all of this already. I have it duplicated. It also has to do with something concerning the time when the king of the north will push at will attack the king of the south. When that happens, you know that in a short while the king of the north will come to his end, and God's people shall be delivered. We went through this already. We went through this already. So this is the final screen I'm going to look at. Here are the three things that I believe were locked up in the book of Daniel. The three main things. Number one, it contained information about the restoration of the sanctuary. Secondly, as we have seen from Daniel chapter 7, it contained information about the judgment of the two kingdoms. And number three, it contains information about the final sign that will take place in the political world. Let me say in the political world, because there are other signs. But what we can know is that when the king of the north comes to his end, then we know that it is time for Jesus to come again. Because it says he shall come to his end and none shall help him. And at that time shall Michael stand up. All right, this is just what I wanted to highlight this evening. I'm going to stop at this point and open up the floor for any questions that might have arisen from our study. I'm especially anxious that everybody should at least understand what I was trying to say this evening. I know that there are details of the prophecies that we have not touched, and I don't intend to touch on them this evening. I didn't intend to touch on them because we are going to come back to these prophecies in greater detail. But what I wanted to do is mainly to show you that the book of Daniel is tied into the book of Revelation. God shows us that the book of Daniel is opened, and we can see it there in the book of Revelation. That is where it's open. When you come to understand Revelation, you have to go back and see that Daniel was where the key lay.